Hello and welcome to a new topic, Analysis of Poetry, Part 1. That is to say, how to analyze poetry. What are the things to keep in mind when we critically analyze poetry? Let's discuss what are the most important ingredients, what are the most important elements in the analysis of poetry. The first one is what kind of poetry? Before you analyze a piece of poem, you must ask a question yourself. What kind of poem is this? The second one is persona. Who wrote this poem? Who is the poet? Who is the creator? Who is the originator? The third one is imagery. What kind of imagery, symbols, images have been used in the poem? And the fourth one is sound patterns, the rhyming patterns, in the way the poetry smoothly moves along. So these are the four most basic components that we should keep in mind before we analyze poetry or before we analyze a piece of poem critically. But in this lesson, I will just talk about the first one, that is to say, what kind of poetry. Okay, so let's move and discuss. The first point in this direction is there are different kinds of poetry categorized along the lines of age, types, region, and form. So before we analyze a piece of poem, we must think in which time or in which period of time, in which age this particular poem was written. The second is types, means what type of poem is this? Is it a lyric poem? Is it ballad? Is it sonnet? What type of poem is this? Then region means the background, the place where this poem was written and the whole atmosphere that might have contributed in the making of this poem. And the last one is form. What form the poet has followed in composing this poem. So these are some of the categorization of poems we must keep in mind before we proceed to analyze a piece of poem critically. We continue. Along the line of types, traditions, we can have epic poetry, medieval poetry, neoclassical poetry, romantic poetry, and modern poetry. As a critic or as a reader, before we analyze a piece of poem, we must know the type of poetry it is, because this will give you direction. This will guide you to analyze the poem in a more systematic manner. We continue. Along the line of forms, we have narrative poetry, satirical poetry, dramatic poetry, ballad, lyric, sonnet, and elegy. So, before we analyze the piece of a poem, we must also know the type of forms. We must also know the forms in which the particular poem has been written. And once you know the form in which a particular poem has been composed, this helps you to analyze that poem from that point of view. We must keep this in mind. We continue our discussion. Analysis of poetry along the line of style and subject matter. And at the end, when we come to know about the various ways in which the poem has been written, then style matters a lot. We look what style has been used by the particular poet in composing this particular piece, and how this style is different from another poet. And this style will help you to judge the subject matter of the poem. So style and subject matter both depend upon each other. In fact, sometimes subject matter decides in the way you are going to write, in the form you are going to write, in the style you are going to write. Both cannot be separated. They are interconnected. So when we analyze a piece of poem, we must keep the style of the poet in our mind, along with the subject matter, along with the content, along with the idea around which the poet is composing this particular piece. Hope you understand the concept. Thank you and goodbye.